Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
From $50,000 a night villas on private islands to $30,000 safari treks, investors are betting big on African tourism.
There are only a select numbers of camp on the African continent that are considered to be ultra luxury.
Welcome to the JW Marriott Masai Mara Lodge here in Kenya.
Billionaires, tech moguls, and Middle Eastern investors are all competing for a share of a growing luxury tourism market.
It's a perfect place for families, for friends, and it's really your own private marine reserve and a beautifully designed house.
On this week's Next Africa podcast, we'll look at what's behind the success of high-end tourism in Africa, who are the winners, and whether this growth could mean a much-needed source of revenue across the continent. I'm Jennifer Zabasajja, and this is the Next Africa podcast, bringing you one story each week from the continent, driving the future of global growth with the context only Bloomberg can provide. So joining me to discuss this today is Bloomberg reporter Prinesha Naidoo. Prinesha, thanks so much for coming on the podcast this week. I think it's your first time. So luxury tourism is really what you dug into for this priority feature. Seems to be having a moment right now across the continent. Talk about maybe why you wanted to dig into this and what sorts of holidays are we talking about? It doesn't seem like your typical bed and breakfast, are they?
Well, Jen, I think bed and breakfast are perhaps the bare minimum that some of these luxury retreats offer. One of the reasons I wanted to dig into this topic was just increasingly seeing and hearing about hotel developments popping up around the continent. And on further investigation, you're right, we did find that luxury tourism happens to be booming in Africa right now. And let me tell you a little bit about the kind of luxury holidays that are on offer. At this point, there are exclusive stays on private islands and protected marine reserves that come complete with the use of a catamaran as well as helicopter transfers. There are also vineyard stays, spa retreats, and ultra-luxury safaris, and even, once-in-a-lifetime adventures such as gorilla trekking that offer rare encounters with wildlife.
What sort of places are we finding these popping up? And who are the main investors behind this? Because this doesn't seem, as you were just mentioning there, bed and breakfast is the bare minimum. So it sounds like there's quite a bit of capital that's gone into making these as luxurious as possible.
That's quite true, Jen. So our reporting shows that this money is coming from all over the world and developments are happening across the vast swathes of the continent. South Africa, of course, is one of the most mature markets for tourism, together with Egypt and Morocco, and those are thriving markets. We're also seeing lots of investor interest in East Africa and also in West Africa. So it really is everything coming together. Our reporting also shows that increasingly some of this money is coming from private capital, the world's top hotel companies, royals, and even billionaires. Our story highlighted Jumeirah Group, which is part of the Dubai ruler's business empire, and that operates the private island we just spoke about a bit earlier. There's also Richard Branson's ultra-luxury Virgin Limited Edition, who have more than half of their retreats on this continent. We also have some of the top American, European, and Asian hoteliers, such as Hilton, Marriott, Club Med, and even Banyan Tree, expanding on the continent. And many local high net worth individuals are also getting in on the action and increasingly partnering with global brands to develop hotels in their home countries.
Why now, Prinesha? Because as you and I know, these places have been around for decades. Why is it that some of these names you just mentioned, who many people are probably quite familiar with, what is the opportunity that they're seeing now?
I think that's twofold, Jen. So Africa is seen right now as one of the last underpenetrated markets for travel and tourism in the world. And then you get to some of the continent's unique offerings. The nature-based offerings are drawing investors, especially after the pandemic, because wellness travel, eco-friendly escapes, and bucket list experiences are at the top of the list of a new generation of post-COVID travelers, I would say.
And it could potentially bring an opportunity for some of these economies. Is that maybe part of the opportunity that, some of these investors are seeing?
Yes, of course. Jen, globally, tourism accounts for about 10% of GDP. And in Africa, only a fraction of that is being realized. So investors are seeing potential there. And they're also seeing travel and tourism as a potentially important sector and catalyst for job creation, infrastructure development, and community upliftment around the continent. We've seen in reporting out the story some of the retreats centered around unspoiled wilderness and wildlife offerings, charged guests conservation and community levies, and part of which goes toward the upkeep of the environment, protecting rare wildlife species, as well as community development projects such as schools and clinics and education type initiatives.
What's the reaction, Prinesha, from the local communities? Is it actually, some of these initiatives that you talk about, are they seeing the benefits yet to it?
In some senses, Jen, yes, they are seeing the benefits of the investments, especially when it comes to job creation and training for jobs that would take place in some of these ultra-luxury hotels and resorts. In reporting out the story, we found that at the very top end, hotels and resorts employ at least 4 people per guest. And so that just speaks to the amount of jobs that the sector could create for the continent.
And when we think about price point, Prinesha, what you're describing, ultra luxury, can you quantify that for us, especially if we're talking about the correlation to job creation and such? How much are some of these guests forking out for these experiences?
It depends on the experiences. There is an ultra-luxury retreat here in South Africa where guests can fork out as much as about $30,000 per night. And that is to be in the biggest wildlife park in the country on safari. And then you have the private island experience, which is about $50,000 per night. So it really does depend on the type of travel they're seeking.
It seems like, as you were mentioning, the most unpenetrated market globally. But I wonder from an investment perspective, is there any fear that potentially some of these, to the clientele and the $50,000 a night, is there a fear that potentially this could be short-lived and all of this investment may vanish as quickly as it arrived?
So, Jen, despite what seems like a sudden hive of activity, our reporting shows that developers are taking quite a measured approach, and many are relying on data for decision-making, and some are even cautioning against overdevelopment because that would destroy natural habitats. Our reporting cites a report by Deloitte on next generation travelers and destinations that shows that Africa and the Middle East are expected to have the highest annual growth in inbound arrivals through 2024. But as you say, there are still some, I suppose, lingering fears, and that is because it's very difficult to project revenue for hotel developments across the continent because they are so seasonal and also cyclical depending on the economy. So that's one of the reasons we see banks only partially fund some development, and that's also why we're seeing private capital increasingly stepping in to fill that void.
And stay with us, Prinesha. When we come back, we'll take a look at what this investment means for the rest of the tourism sector across Africa. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Today, we're talking about the luxury hotel market in Africa, which is seeing a huge growth in investment right now. Prinesha Naidoo is still with me. So, Prinesha, as we've been talking about, so far it's been the luxury and the high-end market that's been getting the bulk of the investment. In your reporting, do you think we'll start to maybe see opportunities for the everyday tourist who maybe can't fork out $50,000? I mean, how is this going to create benefits for tourists across the board, or is it not meant to?
For now, we're seeing the bulk of investments in the ultra-luxury and high-end, especially in emerging cities, because building often requires starting from absolute scratch. In some cities, to set up a hotel, hoteliers have to set up all the basic back-of-office systems and services themselves. These could include services such as bakeries, laundries, water treatment plants, and backup power. So financially, it makes more sense to target the upper end of the market at this stage. But with more and more developments in that end of the market, the infrastructure is being built to support hotels that would come up further down the line. We also are expected to see an increase in developments of budget and mid-scale hotels throughout the continent. And that's because of the rising middle class in Africa that's traveling for both business and pleasure, and that they are mostly seeking affordable hotels and well-run hotels in many parts of the continent. And we are seeing local and international brands stepping up to meet this demand as well.
What types of brands are we seeing? Is it the Marriotts, the Hiltons? Because we have actually, from a personal perspective, the more that I've traveled across the continent, I have seen some of these international brands penetrating economies that they hadn't before. Is that sort of what you observed in your reporting?
That's definitely it. There was a conference in Cape Town that I attended last month where I think 240 new hotel developments were announced across from the budget all the way to upscale properties, and brands like Hilton, Marriott, TUI were some of those that are expanding.
And Prinesha, I know you did. I mean, for anybody who hasn't been able to read your story, they definitely should. But maybe you can illustrate a bit more the types of holidays that you found. $50,000 a night. I can't even picture what that would include. But can you give us sort of a sense of what you found? Because this is on another scale.
So that $50,000 a night holiday would be on the private island off the coast of Tanzania that is set in a protected marine reserve. It comes with the use of a catamaran and helicopter transfers and all the bells and whistles when it comes to luxury accommodation. Importantly, that would be $50,000 a night would be the price to rent out the entire island for the guest and their family.
I see. Were you able to go to any of these in your reporting?
I wish. I did visit one $13,000 a night hotel in Cape Town, which was absolutely beautiful. It was situated in the heart of the V&A waterfront in Cape Town, which is the oldest working harbour in South Africa, set against the backdrop of Table Mountain, with the harbour in the foreground, and just the architecture was quite unique. The hotel was the part of the hotel that I visited was at the top floor, and they had these amazing full-length windows, and you could see out, and it was absolutely stunning, beautiful Cape Town winter's day. And there was also really incredible, unique and eclectic artwork throughout the hotel. So it really had a personality. And I managed to speak to the owner of the hotel during the course of reporting this project. And she actually said that she picked out each and every item across her hotel portfolios herself. Hopefully next time I get to go to the private islands.
It's fascinating. And it's a really interesting space, especially when you think about some of the economies that you were focused in on. Prinesha, thank you so much for joining us. Really great reporting.
Thank you very much, Jen.
And you can read Prinesha's piece on Bloomberg platforms now. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Here's some of the other stories from the region we've been following this week. The partial collapse of a waste dam at a Chinese state-owned copper mine in Zambia may have released 30 times more toxic sludge into the environment than previously reported, according to an independent evaluation of the disaster. And Bank of Ghana Governor Johnson Aziama urged the nation's banks to increase private sector lending to support economic growth. The move came as inflation slowed to a more than 3-year low of 12.1% in July from 23.8% in December. And you can follow these stories across Bloomberg platforms now, including the Next Africa newsletter. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. This program was produced by Adrian Bradley and Tiwa Adebayo. Don't forget to follow and review this show wherever you usually get your podcasts. I'm Jennifer Zabasajja. Thanks as always for listening.